So in the female physique athlete study, the purpose of the study was to investigate the effects of high protein versus low protein intake daily on body composition changes in these female physique athletes, as well as their maximal strength. So basically, they split the participants up into a high protein group and a low protein group. The high protein group consumed about 2.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, while the low protein group consumed around no more than 1.2 grams of kilograms per body weight of body weight per day. So the results showed that the high protein group actually had a higher increased fat-free mass compared to the low protein group, and they also had a higher loss of fat mass compared to the low protein group. So when you look at the macronutrient intake between both, in table 1, they showed baseline macronutrient compared to their 8-week average. And basically, on average, the high protein group consumed almost 400 or so kcals more than the low protein group. And this is due to that higher protein intake. So these calories are coming from the higher protein. Carbohydrates for both groups, while the low protein group had higher carbohydrate intake, they both, as far as baseline to 8-week average, they both, remained around the same. While protein for the high protein group obviously spiked up. So on average, about 89 grams per day. And then after the 8 weeks, it went up to about 157 grams per day. And then for the low protein group, they started around 90 grams per day at baseline and decreased down to about 56 grams per day. So overall, you can see that for their other macronutrients, including the fat, sort of maintained around the same. So as you can see, their macronutrient intake as far as carbohydrates, fat, sort of maintained, while their protein either increased or decreased depending on what group they were placed in. So because these results stated and reported that the high protein group had significantly higher fat-free mass gain compared with the lower group. One of the reasons why this could potentially be, which is stated in the article, is that protein supplementation in conjunction with prolonged resistance training significantly increases the measure of muscle hypertrophy. So these beneficial effects reached a threshold when total protein intake exceeded 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And this was found in another study that was cited in this study. So basically, bringing it back to the current study, 2.4 grams per day was the optimal amount of protein to increase FFM, whereas 1.2 was only suboptimal because it needed to exceed at least 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it appears that the higher protein, because it was 2.4, was the optimal protein intake for increasing fat-free mass. And then the second result that was pretty major was that the high protein group lost a significant amount of fat mass compared to the low protein group, despite the fact, like I stated earlier, that the high protein group actually consumed 400 or so on average more calories per day than the low protein group. However, the reasoning that the high protein group was able to lose more fat mass is because dietary protein has been shown to have a much higher thermic effect compared to carbohydrate and fat intake. So because the higher protein intake had more protein, that dietary protein was lost as heat. Additionally, it has been found in previous studies that a higher protein intake when consumed actually enhances the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which basically is the energy that we expend during activities that don't include exercise. So it could be like walking, like a casual walk to work, but not considered exercise. So it's anything that doesn't include sleeping, eating, or sports related physical activity. So overall, you could say that, you know, the high protein group, even though they consumed higher calories, they still lost more body fat because of these effects from the high protein, you know, expending more energy, being lost as fat, as heat, and the fact that the higher protein intake was actually the optimal for lean body mass.